We're going to have Stephanie Yu about the homestead exemption.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I'll keep it brief. I'm Stephanie Yu from Public Assets Institute. Thanks for having me back again. I just want to touch base on our thoughts about the homestead exemption proposal and some of the analysis that we've done on it. And I have a couple slides, but I'll get to those in a minute. So from our perspective, the biggest issue is that any homestead exemption structure perpetuates the regressivity of the current system, meaning that higher income taxpayers pay a smaller share of their income in school taxes than middle income Vermonters. So at whatever point that exemption phases out, taxpayers above that income point will continue to pay their school taxes based on property value, which is a regressive tax. And the flip side of that is that we're foregoing the revenue that would be brought in from taxing those taxpayers with the most income based on their income. The second piece is that because higher income taxpayers are essentially held harmless under this plan, it's really just redistributing the taxes among Vermonters under $115,000 in household income and creating different winners and losers. In aggregate, the group will bear a similar share of the taxes, it just creates different inequities. Even if this does reduce the group's taxes by the estimated, I think it was 45 million that Julia cited from JFO, unless you're expressly shifting that cost onto higher income taxpayers, you really haven't changed the fundamental unfairness in who pays. And one of those inequities created by this plan is that taxpayers with the same income will have very different tax bills because they're driven by the value of the primary home rather than their ability to pay. The way the current system works, taxpayers with the same income who qualify for income sensitivity, which, as you know, this year is under about 115 in household income, they have the same bill if their towns have the same per pupil spending and their income is below 90,000 and their home value below 400,000, which is about 70% of those taxpayers under 115,000. So most of them are subject to the same rules now, but under this proposed plan, the tax bill vary across the income level, across the same incomes based on property value, which adds more complexity to the system. Fourth, because it's still based on that property tax, it's retaining all of the complexity and frustration with the current property tax system. So the CLA, the disconnect between bills and school budgets, and it's also retaining all of the complexity of the current hybrid system because it's still based on that interaction between income and property value. So people will still need to sort of cross-reference their incomes, their property values, the local CLA, and the exemption levels to really understand their taxes. So I want to share I just have a couple quick slides. And I think what's important to note about these slides is less sort of all of the details and more the shape of how they look, right? So in both the current and the proposed systems, the middle income Vermonters are paying the biggest share of their income in school taxes. So the regressivity is going to carry forward into the new system. And you're really going to see this peak at the middle. So this is what the current system looks like. And you can see pretty clearly those cliffs we've talked about before, the cliff at that 90,000 mark, that's what's happening in the current system. Again, this is different home values across the income spectrum. But in the proposed system, this is what that looks like. So again, I think the most important thing to take away from these charts is really the shape. It peaks in the middle, right? Right around that exemption point, wherever that phase out point might be, those people are going to be the people paying the biggest share of their income in school taxes. And again, these charts aren't trying to be comprehensive in the sense of we know exactly what every interaction is going to be, what every taxpayer's income and property value, how that will play out. But the point is that the shape stays the same. The peak is in the middle. And the other piece of this is that the ability to pay is no longer the main driver of the tax bill. So across the same income level, taxpayers will have very different bills. They have the same ability to pay, but their bills will really range. So take 3 homeowners who all have the same income, right around the state median, which is about 80,000. Right now, they're paying just over $2,000 in taxes if their homes are under 400,000. But under this exemption proposal, a homeowner at that income level, 80,000, with a $250,000 house would pay a similar amount, around 2,000. But somebody at the median house value of about 340 would pay almost $2,700, and somebody with a $400,000 house would pay over $3,000. So that's a pretty big range of bills for people with the same ability to pay. Again, this is while homeowners above 115,000 are held harmless. So there's a lot of changes happening for the taxpayers under $115,000, but not for those who can best afford to pay more. And I know I showed this slide, I think was that last week, but I want to kind of look at it from another angle, which is that any system that starts with a property tax on primary homes is really punishing those people whose primary home is their main asset, which is most people, right? Up through about the 80th percentile of income, the primary home value tends to be higher than taxpayers' net worth. That's both because most of them have mortgages alongside other debt. So at the low end, the primary home value could be 8, 9, 10 times the net worth, and the net worth can even be negative. And even somebody as high as the 80th percentile in income, which is right around that 115,000 mark, their home value is still more than their net worth. So it's only at the high end of the income scale that the primary home value is actually a wholly positive asset and a subset of net worth. So we're assessing taxes on essentially phantom assets for most people. Even when you're exempting some portion of that primary home value, you're still starting with the property value, much of which is not actually owned by the homeowner and does not reflect their true wealth. And at the high end, that primary home value is 5, 10, 25% of the net worth, which is a small sliver of their total wealth. So we know we're only scratching the surface of their ability to pay, even while we're basing taxes for everybody else on much more than their worth. So just to wrap up, we keep coming back to the regressivity of the property tax. As long as you're starting with a property tax, you're perpetuating that regressivity. And as long as you perpetuate that regressivity, school taxes are going to put more pressure on low and moderate income Vermonters than they do on higher income Vermonters, which makes it harder for them to get kids what they need. Another way of looking at this is that you're comfortable with property tax bills driving Vermonters out of their homes if they can't afford to pay them. Rather than worrying about the possibility of exacerbating the housing crisis, there seems to be a sense that this will force Vermonters to right-size the cost of their homes. But the property value often grows faster than ability to pay, especially for low-wage workers and people on fixed incomes. And homes are long-term assets, so you're keeping them over decades potentially. So where the price was at the time of purchase and where it ends up over the life of your mortgage or over the life of your family's changing needs, those can really diverge. Not to mention the fact that, as we know, there aren't really more affordable homes available to people at the moment. So I want to acknowledge, I appreciate that this plan could cut taxes for a lot of Vermonters, but it would also raise them for quite a few moderate income Vermonters. And it would add a lot more variability and complexity to the system. Any plan that starts with property value fails to address the fundamental unfairness in how we pay for schools because it avoids asking higher income Vermonters to contribute as much to schools as everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.